tragic flooding with Houston Public Media reporter Dominic Anthony Walsh, reporting live from Central Texas at the top of the hour. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm guest host Doug Miller. We will also talk with Wall Street Journal correspondent Jim Carlton, who is reporting on the warnings issued by state and federal agencies. What went right? What may have gone wrong?
Plus, Dr. Marni Axelrad, pediatric psychologist at the Texas Children's Hospital, joins us to discuss grief and how to talk to children about these type of disasters.
And we want to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, comments, give us a call or a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. More than 80 lives in Central Texas are lost, the vast majority in Kerr County, as a result of floods over the holiday weekend. Democratic Representative Joaquin Castro, whose district is still recovering from deadly floods a few weeks ago, is calling for an investigation into the role that GOP-backed DOGE cuts at the National Weather Service might have played in the recent flooding deaths. Today, Republican Texas Senator Ted Cruz denounced that as partisan finger-pointing.
I also think it's worth noting that the National Weather Service Union, which has been very critical of the DOGE cuts, has publicly said that they don't believe that the reduction in staffing had any impact whatsoever on their ability to warn of this event.
The National Weather Service forecasts more excessive rainfall and a moderate risk of flash floods that could complicate emergency response in Texas. The White House says this Wednesday's tariff deadline could be extended to August 1st for some countries as negotiations on possible deals continue. The president says letters informing trading partners of new tariff rates are going out today. Here's NPR's Don Gagné.
Tariffs have been Trump's trade weapon of choice. A few months ago, he famously imposed steep and wide-ranging tariffs on imports from more than 100 nations, including close allies like Japan and the European Union. But since that day in April, the president has taken an on-again, off-again approach with some individual nations. That's made the policy difficult to track for negotiators, but also for consumers in the U.S., who will eventually bear the cost. Still, a deadline for countries to reach an agreement with the Trump White House looms. Don Gagné, NPR News.
Ukraine and Russia traded drone attacks over the weekend. The president of Ukraine announced drone production deals with Western allies and a U.S. defense company. NPR's Joanna Kissis reports from Kyiv that hopes for a ceasefire have faded after the Kremlin signaled it would keep attacking.
Hundreds of flights at Russian airports were delayed this weekend due to Ukrainian drone strikes. Russia also attacked Ukrainian cities with drones, causing injuries in the capital, Kyiv, and the northeastern city of Kharkiv, and also hitting the port of Mykolaiv in the southeast. In a video address this weekend, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he hopes his country will receive hundreds of thousands of drones this year in production deals with Western allies. Russia has stepped up drone and missile attacks on Ukraine in recent weeks. Last week, the Pentagon suddenly froze air defense munitions headed to Ukraine. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
From Washington, this is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Search and rescue is the priority right now, according to Dalton Rice, the city manager at Kerrville. Rice says the water rose about 20 to 30 feet in less than a 2-hour time span. Within the last hour at a press conference, officials confirmed 75 people dead in Kerr County, 48 adults and 27 children, some pending identification. And community members in Kerr County are rallying to support one another. Marissa Baldwin and her son Hudson dropped off blankets and towels at a supply depot in Ingram.
It is small, and so everyone knows someone that's been affected. We have friends that are missing, friends that were recovered. So everyone's just doing what they can.
I'm too young to really understand it, but I know it's devastating to everybody around Kerrville.
And Kerrville Mayor Joe Herring Jr. is asking for prayers as the city faces this crisis. Houston's Montrose neighborhood has lost a proposed bike lane due to Mayor John Whitmire's administration. The lane would have been part of the West Alabama Street Reconstruction Project. News 88.7's Dominic Anthony Walsh has more.
The 1.6-mile project stretches from Shepherd Drive to Spur 527 off of Highway 59. It includes roadway repaving, wider sidewalks, and drainage improvements, but no bike lane.
We have an administration, a new administration, and they have a slightly different take on roadway and how roads should be built.
Muhammad Ali is with H.R. Green, the engineering firm creating the design. Whitmire's administration issued new rules last year prohibiting the reduction of the number or width of car lanes. The bike lane would have required narrowing car lanes from 12 to 10 feet.
It's really very difficult to accommodate bike lanes due to these right-of-way constraints that we have.
Construction is expected to kick off in late 2026. I'm Dominic Anthony Walsh, News 88.7.
It's currently 87 degrees on the UH campus, partly cloudy. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Thank you for tuning in today, Monday, July 7th. We are coming out of a very tragic and contemplative holiday weekend, and whether you are listening to us on your radio or joining us via YouTube, today we are continuing our coverage of the Central Texas flooding. Frank and Ernie are both out on holiday still. However, I am very excited to have Doug Miller sitting right next to me, joining us as my fill-in co-host. Good morning, Doug.
Well, it's good to be here on such a sad day, to join you on such a time. It has been a weekend that has tried the soul of our state.
And Doug, you are an award-winning journalist. With more than 30 years in the industry. What was going through your mind? What were some of your thoughts as we were receiving this breaking news and we're all watching the headlines come across our TVs, our phones? What were some of your thoughts?
The magnitude was simply astonishing. And one of the main points that hit me about this was it was an event that happened in Central Texas, but it has affected all of Texas. Many of the victims come from Houston. They come from Dallas. They come from Austin. They come from all over the state. And this is one of those events that has affected people very personally, very deeply, obviously seeing the pictures of children who were missing and so on. But also, I get the feeling that everybody knows somebody who knows someone who is dead or missing.
Yes.
And it is deeply affected the people of the state of Texas.
And as always, you are welcome to join the conversation at 713-440-8870, or you can email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Today we are going to have, as I was watching this at home, my 9-year-old daughter was sitting there, and she had friends at Camp Mystic that thankfully were able to get out, evacuate safely. And so I think that there's just so many parents. So we are going to have Dr. Marni Axelrad, the clinic chief and pediatric psychologist, joining us later today, as well as a reporter. Doug, why don't you tell us about what else is coming on the show?
We've got, obviously, we're going to be talking with our own reporter who is at the scene. I've been covering it all weekend long here. And in addition to Dominic, we're going to have a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, a correspondent, Jim Carlton, who I spoke with over the weekend, and he's focusing largely on the emergency response, not so much the emergency response, I should say, but the warnings that were issued and should have been issued. Jim is a particularly suited to cover this topic because he's a West Coast correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, and he has covered the wildfires in that area. And a lot of procedures have been instituted to get the word out, to warn people about wildfires in California, which could be something that we could learn from here in the state of Texas.
And that's the big question that's looming. What went wrong? But
right.
Let's get into our topics today.
Well, search and rescue efforts continue in Central Texas, where the flash flooding has left at least 89 people dead. That number confirmed moments ago by state authorities. Survivors of the disaster, as you know, were surprised in the pre-dawn hours of Friday morning by the sudden and dramatic rise of the Guadalupe River 26 feet in 45 minutes. Most of the victims are from Kerr County, which is a site of many children's summer camps. At least 11 children attending the Camp Mystic girls' summer camp are still missing at this point. Authorities say more than 850 people were rescued so far, many of them, of course, by helicopter. Some of the affected areas still have no power, no internet access, and the search continues.
And joining us now is Houston Public Media reporter Dominic Anthony Walsh, who has been on the ground in Kerr County. Dominic, thanks for joining us on Hello Houston. Why don't we start with, can you give us the latest update from what local officials are saying right there in Kerr County?
Right, so the death toll has ticked up, as we just heard from Doug. Officials have also been hesitant to say how many people are still missing, so it's unclear how much that death toll could rise. Of course, this is a popular spot for campers and hikers. This happened on the 4th of July, so they've been hesitant to say how many are missing. We did hear from Camp Mystic this morning. They confirmed that 27 campers and counselors have been found dead. They said in a statement, "Our hearts are broken alongside our families that are enduring this unimaginable tragedy. We are praying for them constantly."
Now, Dominic, you have been out and about talking to the Kerr County community. Can you tell us how they're doing? How is the community coping? And what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I have been at supply depots, reunification sites, and a neighborhood that flooded. At the supply depots, folks are really coming together to step up and share resources with those in need. I chatted with a few folks that were dropping off supplies, and they emphasized that this is a tight-knit community. You know, just over 50,000 people live in Kerr County, and so everyone knows someone who's been affected. Some of the folks I chatted with know people who were still missing. So a lot of anxiety, a very somber mood in those places. At the Reunification Center, I stopped by on Saturday. Families of Camp Mystic campers were waiting to pick up girls who had been recovered, who had been rescued, I should say. And media was asked to stay back from the families, but I spoke with the director of the Reunification Center, the board president of the Arcadia Theater in Kerrville. He said that the mood, of course, was somber. Usually the weekend would be full of festivities for the 4th of July, and all of that was very much turned upside down. In the neighborhood that I stopped by yesterday, the Bumblebee Hills subdivision in between Ingram and Hunt, one of the most devastated areas, I spoke with multiple families who were dealing with homes that had been flooded with 1 foot to 2 feet of water. They were watching as almost everything they owned was hauled away and thrown into dumpsters, and they were still in shock, still processing what happened. They also expressed gratitude. You know, they felt lucky to be alive. They felt grateful for everybody that was coming out to provide support. I met volunteers from across the state who were inside strangers' homes, helping them clear out debris and mud. So a real somber mood here in Kerr County, but also the spirit of the community is coming out. Folks are coming together, and help is flooding in from across the state.
So, Dominic, the Guadalupe River has a history of flooding. I was looking at a history of the river earlier today. It dates all the way back to 1913. There have been repeated dramatic floods that have been deadly in that area. Was there a sense, the people you're talking to there, that, yeah, this is the sort of thing that happens once in a while, or was this simply something so devastating that no one expected it?
Flood warnings are common in this part of the river. The comparison that I really heard was to 1987, a pretty devastating flood that happened back then. In that flood, 10 teenagers died. And so the scale of the loss of life here is much higher. And residents who I spoke with who were around in 1987 said that this flood was more devastating. The water rose higher. Flood gauges that measure the height of the water were actually taken offline by the floodwaters. So we don't know exactly how high the floodwaters rose just yet. But this is definitely one of the most devastating floods that this area has seen. And it's very much few and far between when it comes to floods of this magnitude.
There were videos that surfaced over the weekend that I found astonishing, and I've seen a lot of flooding. The rapidity with which the river rose was breathtaking. There was a video that perhaps you saw that showed a mild stream at one point, and just a few minutes later, the water was rushing through, and debris and cars, and eventually a house was racing away after about 30 minutes. Did people talk about that? Were they stunned? Were they also stunned at the rapidity with which the river rose?
Yes, the residents in the neighborhood that flooded, who I spoke with, said that they were shocked. They were caught off guard. They didn't know it was coming until it hit them. And when it did hit them, it hit them quickly. The water rose rapidly in their homes. The current was very strong. Fortunately, in that neighborhood of about 24 homes, there was a single house on a hill. And so everyone in the neighborhood was able to get up to that house where they sheltered for the night and into the next day. But yes, the shock at the speed with which the floodwaters came was a consistent theme that I heard from folks, as well as what they described as a lack of warning. No one knew what was coming until it hit them.
You know, Dominic, there also have been reports that there have been some tensions between local officials and state officials. Some finger pointing has been happening. What can you tell us about the dynamic on the ground there between the different agencies working right now to get information out?
At the press conferences I've been monitoring, I haven't heard that. I've heard gratitude from local officials for the state and federal response. There has been some amount of shifting responsibility, I would say. Some light questioning of the National Weather Service alerts. The National Weather Service, for its part, has defended its forecasts and its warnings in advance of these floods. You know, heading into Thursday night, there was a flood watch in effect. After midnight, that was elevated to a flood warning. It was eventually elevated to their highest alert level for floods, and they also sent out alerts to people's phones. One of the questions, though, is at the local level. You know, the Washington Post did an analysis that found the local government did not issue an Amber Alert style push notification to phones until Sunday, so 2 days after the flooding happened. And so there are definitely questions about that. Local officials have said that they're going to do a full inquiry into what exactly happened and whether something different should have been done.
There are questions being raised nationally, but I wonder if you're seeing or hearing not just questions, but anger. Are people at the point of anger in the local community, or are they simply saying, you know, there's something was weird about this. We should have gotten some alerts. What's the attitude you're picking up from the people in the area?
I've heard mixed feelings. I've heard from some who say there was no way to know that this was coming, and they don't place blame on anyone for the preparation or the lack thereof. I've also heard from some who, of course, did wish that they had warning before the flood waters reached their homes. So I don't think that there's quite a consensus just yet. We'll see how the reaction plays out as more details unfold. You know, the timeline really starts as early as Wednesday. That's when the state's emergency management division mobilized swift water rescue teams in anticipation of flooding. So the state had resources on the ground headed into this. And then we've walked through the National Weather Service's timeline. And so I think the big question at this moment is why the local government waited or failed to issue that Amber Alert style push notification to residents until Sunday.
Dominic Anthony Walsh is one of our Houston public media reporters. Thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston, Dominic.
Thank you.
And if you want to find more in-depth reporting, you can head to our website at houstonpublicmedia.org. And as well, if you'd like to comment on the different topics that we are talking about today, and it's the Central Texas of flooding, you can give us a call at 713-440-8870. Coming up later on, we will be speaking with Wall Street journalist, reporter Jim Carlton, who
he's been covering this very question that Dominic talked about. He's focusing on the very question of what sort of warnings could have been sent out, what should have been sent out. Obviously, questions being raised. In any circumstance like this, you will have some people who want to assign some sort of blame. You'll have some people who but some people want to assign blame somewhere. I recall all those many years that I worked in television news, and we constantly heard people saying, "Well, the weather guy. If I had a job like the weather guy, where I was wrong, so 8% of the time or whatever, I'd be fired." Yeah, my only thought on this is they're trying to predict what is routinely called an act of God, and it's very, very difficult to do. We'll be talking later with a meteorologist about this very subject. Can you really assess blame on a meteorologist for not being able to see something this wildly unpredictable?
Right, but I also think that in that area, we also know that it was very predictable that this area floods. So there is a certain amount of a disconnect between all the little components that add up for this type of catastrophic event to happen, And as I was watching it, some of my thoughts were, where was that break? But yes, we will continue to continue with our coverage of the Central Texas floodings when coming up on Hello Houston. Like we just mentioned, Wall Street Journal reporter Jim Carlton will join us to discuss what exactly happened with the weather warning systems during this flood event. This is News 88.7.
It's more important than ever to stay informed. That's why Houston Public Media delivers well-researched news that's free for everyone.
And right now, your support helps make sure it stays that way. No subscription, no paywall, just news that's here when you need it.
Give today to keep yourself and your community informed, no matter what the future holds.
Make your donation now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Or call 888-909-0887.
You can't tackle life's big challenges if you let the little ones get you down. That's why Houston Matters devotes the first Monday of each month to a sort of group moan session we call Houstonian Pet Peeves. It's a communal, cathartic experience, but not everyone can join us live at 9 a.m., and not every peeve occurs to you right then and there. That's okay. We welcome your gripes about life in Houston anytime at talk@houstonmatters.org.
I want to make a movie about this.
The Arts Hour brings you film.
The themes in it are so far ahead of their time.
Books.
The detail is amazing.
Art.
There's all the personal stuff.
Theatre.
Lots of singing and dancing and colours.
Music.
The dance floor is made for dancing.
And everything in between.
I want it to be exciting.
That's the Arts Hour with me, Nikki Beatty.
I really identified with it.
From the BBC.
The Arts Hour, Friday nights at 9 on News 88.7. Support comes from Gulf Coast Blood, providing everything your group needs to save lives and make an impact in your community. Info on hosting a blood drive at your business, school, place of worship, or organization is at giveblood.org/hostablooddrive.
Support comes from Blake Hillegeist Real Estate, independent commercial and residential real estate broker with over 30 years experience guiding clients through economic downturns, realty challenges, and everyday life situations. More at blakesellshouston.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celestia Sherman and special guest host Doug Miller.
We continue our coverage of the Texas Hill Country where devastating floods swept through communities in central Texas. Now the disaster has raised serious questions about the timing of emergency alerts. Joining us today is Jim Carlton, West Coast correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. His latest reporting examines how the warnings came too late for many and what it says about the growing strain on our emergency systems in an era of extreme weather. And you can join the conversation. If you have a question for Jim, you can call or text at 713-440-8870. Jim, welcome to Hello Houston.
Good to be here. Hi, Celeste.
Hi.
Jim, we have heard stories about people who had no sense that they were in danger when they went to bed on the night before the 4th of July, who woke up in the middle of the night to discover water flooding into their cabins or their RVs. So tell us, what sort of warnings did people get before this catastrophe fell upon them?
Hi, Doug. That's what we're really trying to ascertain, the warnings. That there's really, right now, the National Weather Service has been very adamant that they gave proper warning. They've been getting some, criticism online, but actually, 1:18 a.m., they put out an alert, flash flood emergency. That signals you should evacuate. The flood water didn't actually hit Camp Mystic and the other camps and RV parks until around 4 a.m., 4 to 4:30 a.m. And so the question now is, how did they actually know? Did the Sheriff's Department, Kerr County, go door to door? We don't have evidence yet that they did. A lot of times, I'm in California. When we have a fire disaster, usually the sheriff will go door to door, or the fire department. In this case, there's a critical lapse. And cell phones. These girls didn't have cell phones. They're not allowed to there. I don't think even the staff. And so there's going to be some adult in the camp that presumably does. But Doug, right now, we're trying to figure out what alert they got, if any.
Well, you raise an interesting question there. This is a very remote area, and I wondered about cell phones. So were there issues with any cell phone coverage, or was it simply an issue that these girls just didn't have their cell phones? Or were cell phones not allowed at the camp?
Yeah, what we're hearing, I had boys and Boy Scouts out here in California, and the rule is no phones, no electronic equipment. For obvious reasons, they want you to focus. They don't want you to be buried in your gadget, right? So at these camps, they have a no electronics policy, and it's for staff and for the kids. I say girls, there's some boys camps too, so presumably boys camps as well. But I think that the adult in charge, the grown-ups in charge, would have phones. And the question is on the cell coverage. I think it's said to be very spotty there. And so they do have a code red alert where the sheriff can push out a wireless alert that, you need to seek higher ground. But did they, we're trying to find out when that was sent out, and was there coverage in that area? Those are good questions, actually.
Now, Jim, I do also have questions when we're looking at the timeline of this. From different reports that I've been seeing is that some of these warnings were started Thursday. And so do we know if some of these camp directors, Camp La Junta was able to get out, all these boys, and I know that was a different part of the Guadalupe, but it didn't seem that far off. Can you elaborate on maybe some of that communication? Do you know, based on from Thursday, what was happening until July 4th, that morning?
Well, Celeste, the real disconnect here is, you're right. The Texas Division of Emergency Management, actually, the guy Nim, forget his last name, but the director, he was making a point in a press conference that we were deploying resources the night of. They had put out, alerts Thursday to be prepared for flooding. They learned that the forecast was going to be there was some modeling that was exceeded the 4 to 6 inches that they had predicted, and so they put swiftwater rescue boats deployed. Because he said they were able to respond immediately, so they knew. So the $1 million question is, knowing that, I guess what did the camps know? Was that information related to the camps? Why didn't they, respond when they did? And critically, we can talk about this in a bit, but they had no outdoor warning siren, like a tornado siren, like a lot of other flood communities do.
You know, you anticipate my next question there, Jim. I was going to ask you. You cover the you cover the West Coast for the Wall Street Journal. You've covered the California wildfires, probably more of them than you'd like to think about. What sort of warning systems are in place in California to warn people about impending disasters there? Do they have sirens? What kind of systems do they have? What can we learn from that?
So California is kind of state of the art in terms of alerts, and a lot of that's been learned the hard way, honestly, Doug. There was the Tubbs fire I'm in the Bay. I'm in San Francisco. The Tubbs fire wiped out part of Santa Rosa, California. Dozens of people killed, and that night there wasn't really an alert. There wasn't. They didn't push out the alerts in time, and it was. They've moved that ahead. Now there's something called the WIA, the wireless emergency alert that most California counties have. On top of that, CAL FIRE, which is kind of the umbrella fire agency in the state of California, they make a point that if there is a red flag fire danger that the Weather Service predicts, they deploy strike teams, resources in critical fire areas, and they're ready to go. Los Angeles got criticized because they didn't do the same level of preparedness for Pacific Palisades and Malibu that CAL FIRE would normally do. But I mean, normally you'd have resources ready, kind of like Texas did. But California relies a lot on the phones, and then they'll have the cops go out. In Pacific Palisades, LAPD was going up through the neighborhoods. You need to get out. You need to get out. And they were like helping get people out. Kerr County, what was the sheriff's department doing? What was the fire department doing? We're still trying to get our handles around that. It's still not a lot of time, so I mean, maybe they were out there, but we're just trying to figure that out ourselves.
And this is the thing, though. We don't have to necessarily even go all the way to California to learn lessons. In 1987, this part of the Guadalupe River flooded. We saw that certain areas, based on that, certain areas of the Guadalupe River did put certain sirens. And why do we know why this area, particularly where there are going to be children coming in for summer camps, there haven't been any sirens put in, just basic alert systems?
Celeste, that is really a puzzling question and troubling, actually. Excuse me. Yesterday, we dove into the minutes of the Kerr County Commissioner's Court going back the last decade. In 2016, there's the sheriff then. His name was Rusty Heelholzer. He's retired now. But they were talking about, I think we need to get outdoor warning sirens. Comal County, New Braunfels, right next door, they have a wonderful system, state of the art. It's way ahead of ours. They have 8 sirens, and that's along the Guadalupe also. And the sheriff was saying, and I'll just read this because it's so compelling. He said, and this he's talking about the 1987 flood. He said, the one thing we've talked about, all the RV parks, but the most important thing that we have always run across, and that's been, we spent hours in these helicopters pulling kids out of trees from our summer camps. And a lot of that, is during our flooding time. You need the sirens. He said this in 2016. There was a commissioner there named Tom Moser. He was saying that, we need to get on this, but let's, we need to get some money. So basically, they asked for a grant from the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and it was declined. In 2018, they came back. And we were declined. It didn't say why. It's $1 million grant. And then 2023 it came up again, and 2 more requests for grants declined. We tried to ask the state why. They haven't responded. I know they're busy, but they haven't really answered that question yet. But the point is, they knew that they needed sirens, that they didn't get them.
This is a recurring phenomenon in disasters. I did a lot of research on the 1900 storm in Galveston a few years back. And what I discovered by digging through old city council meeting minutes in Galveston was that a hurricane had struck in 1875, another one in 1886. There was discussion about building a seawall, an awful lot of talk about it. Yeah, we need to get onto this. We need to get onto this. And then after a while, memories just faded, and 1900 came around, and 6,000 to 8,000 people died before they got around to building the seawall. This is a recurring phenomenon, so you've got to wonder, are they going to jump onto it now? Is there going to be a discussion at city council meetings or at the state? It sounds like there's an awful lot of finger pointing going on over there. So.
Well, there's actually a bill that was introduced in the Texas legislature in March by a representative up in the Panhandle after the Texas Panhandle wildfires that would it would create a statewide network of money for counties to get warning sirens, specifically for sirens and other equipment. And it died in committee. I don't know why it died in committee in I think May. But yeah, I mean they know they need this and they don't get it. And I think, Doug, you're right. It's just kind of like, the emergency moves on. They just kind of other things happen. There's priorities and costs and that kind of thing. But yeah.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking to Jim Carlton, a West Coast correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. You can give us a call at 713-440-8870 to join the conversation. Right now we have a call from Thomas from Montgomery. Thomas, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question for Jim?
Well, where I used to live in New Jersey, people were hit by lightning. So they put people hit and killed by lightning. And so they put in sensors that detect an electrical disturbance in the atmosphere at a certain distance, I think to an eighth of a mile or something like that. And it's near the schools. So anytime there's an electrical storm, the siren goes off, and you can hear it. And you can hear it all over the place. And a lot of towns have them. I don't see why they can't have some kind of a thing for flooding. Put a siren in. Of course, people have to pay attention to them. That's a problem. There's no siren down here for lightning or anything, because I were hurt by now. I've been here 6 years. Mm-hmm. But you need some kind of sirens. You need to tell people about it. And this is a crazy state where you got a governor who wants people to carry guns. What can you do with a gun? Fire a gun into the flood and prevent the flood? I mean,
thank you, Thomas. Crazy. Thank you for your comments, Thomas. Jim, what do you think about that? Everybody's just kind of sitting here saying, pointing at the most obvious thing. Why wasn't there a siren? And it sounds like the local community it's been brought up before.
Well, Celeste, we don't know for sure that this would have made a difference. We don't know that. We'll never know that. But what we can say is that down the river, Comfort, Texas, in Kendall County, they had sirens. When the floodwaters were approaching there, the sirens sounded. I don't know if anybody died. Maybe a small number in Kendall County, but it wasn't the catastrophic loss of life like we saw in Kerr County. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we can say that the sirens did sound downstream. People did get out of the way. And, like tornadoes, I mean, it's just good to have a head start. I mean, even if these poor girls had 5, I was talking to there's a woman in San Antonio named Nicole Wilson. She's so upset. She's an Army veteran. She said she's started a change.org petition to get, make, the whole state, every flood-prone county in the state have these outdoor warning sirens. They cost maybe $40,000 each. It's not really that much. I mean, it's a lot, but it's not backbreaking. And but I suspect Kerr County will get the. I mean, now they probably will. I mean, but it's just sad.
And it's noteworthy, I think, that the Governor Abbott has said he's going to add some sort of response to this, to the that's going to be discussed in this upcoming special session of the legislature. And perhaps it will get more attention now because of this disaster, and also because the agenda is so much shorter for special sessions. Maybe finally something will happen.
That's right. And again, you can join the conversation, 713-440-8870. We do have a call from Wayne from Galveston. Welcome to Hello Houston, Wayne. What is your comment or question?
My comment is we can have an Amber Alert for a missing child, an Amber Alert for the lottery ticket, an Amber Alert for this and that. But if a train is on the track and see a car, it blow a horn, the car get off the track. But what I don't understand, even if they took the kids' phones and electronics, that means you're going to protect them. You got to blow a horn or have something because you had this done in 87. It shouldn't be that many people dead. And people keep saying, well, this would have happened, this couldn't have happened. There's a whole lot of stuff couldn't happen. I couldn't have woke up in the morning. But what I'm saying is, quit cutting this money. These taxpayers sending money, protect them kids. That's the next generation. Ain't no reason in the world that we losing these kids like we losing them, and we supposed to be the grown-ups. And I leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Well, it sounds like we've got a consensus, at least here on the airwaves, about this. Let's see if state lawmakers do it.
It's interesting, though, Doug and Jim, that everybody's saying this is very obvious, but whenever these type of topics or issues actually go to a city council meeting and have to take a vote, and you're looking at funding, a lot of times it boils down to people don't want their tax money to the taxpayers don't want to pay more taxes. And from what I understand, when they brought this up at multiple different times at City Council in Kerr County, that was one of the reasons why it never kind of took. Jim, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Now, wasn't there a sheriff or someone who made a comment in that regard up there saying, the taxpayers aren't interested?
Taxpayers aren't interested.
Yeah, exactly. His name's he's the judge of Kerr County.
Yes,
there we are.
And he made a couple of public statements that we did consider these sirens, but the taxpayers wouldn't support it. I don't know. They clearly did want these. The commission, the county commission was trying to get money from the state. So I don't know whether they're trying to get $1 million. That's a lot of money, but then again, how much money is going to cost now? This disaster and the incalculable loss of life. So, we actually tried to talk to that judge ourselves to ask him the same question. He's a very busy guy, so he hasn't returned our calls yet. But that's it's a great question.
Jim, my other question for you is, as somebody who has covered the California wildfires so closely, and now you're looking at this, are you seeing any parallels, or is it drastically different when you're covering something like natural disasters? And specifically, what are you seeing, some of the parallels and some of the differences?
Well, I was just talking to some of my colleagues. I also covered the Lahaina wildfires out in Maui that destroyed the entire town. Mm-hmm. And I was just saying, this really reminds me of, years. We went through the minutes of, Maui County Fire Commission meetings going back years, and also found, we really need to do more to protect Lahaina. It's going to burn up. These winds come in, and there's all this old, the sugarcane fields that are not, there's grass in them, and it's very flammable. We need to do something. There was actually a fire that almost took out Lahaina, like 2 years before it got taken out. And then they were talking that we urgently need to do more to evacuate. Nothing happened until the town burned up, and 100 people died. It's the worst loss of life in modern U.S. history. I just think that humans sometimes learn the hard way. Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And again, you can join the conversation, 713-440-8870. We do have a call from Benjamin from Coleman, Texas. Benjamin, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question?
Yes, in regards to the sirens and this and that, one thing that we do, for example, in Coleman, we all have a weather radio, and we hang it in any of the hallways of the house. And you can be asleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, and this raspy noise will come on, along with this is the National Weather Service in San Angelo, Texas. A tornado warning has been issued and they tracked the tornado. They tracked it even 3 miles away from my house one time about 6-7 years ago. So why is it that this camps didn't have those weather radios, et cetera, and who regulates this camps that issue licenses without an emergency system, even a weather radio to be posted on site?
You raise a good question.
That's a great question.
Very good question.
Thanks for calling. Jim, do you have any insight on kind of that regulation in camps? Have y'all seen anything? Has that ever come up before in some of the documentation that y'all are looking through?
Well, it's interesting that the caller just brought that up, because I just got an email from somebody with like a weather radio manufacturer talking about that exact same thing. And I was thinking the same thing, like maybe weather radios would do it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. He also raised a good question. The regulation of these camps, do they have to do drills? Do they, so my kids were in Boy Scouts out here in California, and they were in a camp where it's fire. So they always have to do like a fire at the beginning of the camp. they'd assemble all the boys and say, okay, here's where you come in case there's a wildfire. You know what? And they would do the protocol of what to do if there's a wildfire. And so I don't know if they did any flood protocols there. I suspect not, because it's so it doesn't happen hardly ever. I mean, it's very unusual. But I mean, yeah, I mean the caller raised some really two good questions.
So Jim, what can people expect from some of the coming from your coverage? Can you tell us anything? What you all will be looking for moving forward?
Well, this is such a huge story, so we're trying to do a timeline of just exactly what happened. We're doing more accountability of what could be done better. I mean, all of these disasters, as Doug knows. Doug and I, by the way, go back to the early '80s Houston police reporters. We have some, some stories to tell from those days, and no one's covered more Texas disasters than Doug Miller. He's the legend in terms of hurricane coverage.
A legend.
Shout out to Doug there.
Shout out to Doug Miller.
All right, thanks, Jim. You'll get the money in the mail later.
But anyway, so it's just we're just going to keep trying to follow just follow the story.
And we do have quite a few calls coming in. We will be taking some of those calls now, and then coming up later on, we will also be talking about how to talk to children about grief. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. We have a call from Lee from League City. Lee, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hello. My question is, isn't the local National Weather Service station still out of order? I tried to tune in this morning. There's no signal. It was a fire at the transmitter site in Hitchcock a while back. We're in hurricane season, and as far as I know, we don't have a broadcasting station in this area still.
You're talking about in the Houston area?
Yes, the Houston Galveston office in League City, but the transmitter was in Hitchcock.
Well, Jim wouldn't know about that. He's obviously focused on Central Texas. So, Jim, I won't put you on the spot on that. Do you know anything about that?
But we will have a meteorologist who will be joining us later on, who is in Kerr County and Kerrville, I believe, specifically, and we will try to ask that question. Then, Jim, have you heard anything about the NWS? I know that Dominic mentioned that there has been some questioning around that. I think a lot of people, obviously, when we're looking at the news, this is something that's been top of mind before, this happened. Jim, do you have any insight on that?
Well, I know that there is a concern that with the Doge cuts that the Weather Service would be cut to the bone, and that would impede public safety. Here in California, there was like the caller said, I think there's some more remote weather stations that might close, and so there's concern about that. At least in the case of this flood, it doesn't look like the Weather Service didn't do his job. It sounds like they were on top of the ball. They put the alert out at 1:18 a.m. So they put out alerts, plenty of alerts. And I understand they actually were staffed up well. I mean, even though there have been some vacancies in the San Antonio and Austin offices, they were staffed up well for the holiday weekend.
We also have a call from Cindy from Sugar Land. Cindy, what is your comment or question? Welcome to Hello Houston.
Hi. Oh, thank you. So it seems like July 4th holiday was possibly a distraction. There was a concert scheduled for down by the river. There are holiday makers on RV parks. So there's a lot of funds that come in from holiday makers that people were maybe reluctant to let go, and were maybe just in the terms of human nature, hoping for the best.
Thanks, Cindy. It really does sound like that was it was a kind of a perfect storm situation where it was holiday. We know that local officials have also said that the time the flooding hit at 4 a.m. I mean, that is really tough. Jim, what can you tell us about that as well?
I just don't. I mean, just like Cindy said, it's just perfect storm. I mean, your guard's down a little bit. People are having fun. So we've always worried about Lake Tahoe has a similar concern. It gets just packed with people 4th of July, but yet that's one of the highest wildfire dangers in the world. And I mean, every summer we go by, just please don't have a fire start when there's tens of thousands of people there and all these choke points. It'd be catastrophic. And so I mean, we have a lot of kind of dangerous areas. I never realized myself how dangerous that area around New Braunfels. I mean, I used to live in Texas. I've been on the Guadalupe River, floating in a little tubing, and I said, "Oh, this is a peaceful river." I didn't really realize how catastrophic it can be until I started getting into the story. So.
And again, we have a call from Brian from the Galleria. Brian, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question?
Yes, unfortunately, I guess I'm just going to piggyback on what everybody else says. When I called in, nobody had really been mentioning that, but I think it's just, again, it's a perfect storm. I mean, holiday hours, like maybe I hear that they were pretty well staffed at the National Weather Service stations and all that, but, you got a lot of people on the river enjoying their holiday weekend, and it was in the middle of the night. I'm not the biggest fan of the government, but I really also feel like they shouldn't take 100% of the blame, because there's only so much you could have done, and if people were sleeping, and like I said, just a perfect storm with all those people there, everybody looking to have a good time, and everybody wanted to take the day off, and then that's just when it hit. It was just very unfortunate.
Brian, thanks for calling in and sharing your comments and thoughts. And Jim Carlton, a West Coast correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Jim, thanks for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me. It's great being with you guys. I pray for those people and their families.
Thank you, Jim.
You bet. Thanks, Jim.
Coming up, we will talk to a psychiatrist about how to help children process grief. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
I'm Josh Adams, the new general manager of Houston Public Media, and we are here for one reason: you. I'm thrilled to lead this remarkable team dedicated to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring everyone in the greater Houston area. And yes, these are challenging times, but together we'll meet them head on with bold ideas, honest reporting, and stories that matter. Houston Public Media is your public media. Together, let's make it incredible.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVIN.com. Purchasing vehicles in minutes with the VIN or license plate, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at GiveMeTheVIN.com.
Houston Public Media, in partnership with Texas Southern University, brings to you The Vibe. R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul. Music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, Ken Burns explores one of the most prominent and influential families in American politics. The documentary series, The Roosevelts, continues tonight at 9 on TV 8 or stream on the PBS app.
Support comes from Baylor College of Medicine, creating tomorrow's medicine today. Known for their medical research and innovation, Baylor pushes boundaries through health discoveries and their pursuit to improve the health of humankind.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celestia Sherman and special guest host Doug Miller.
By now, we have all seen the images of the rising waters, the photos of precious little girls missing, homes damaged beyond repair, and of course, the heroic first responders and volunteers risking their lives to help the Kerr County communities devastated by the flooding in Central Texas. As adults, this type of devastation can be overwhelming and hard to comprehend. And oftentimes, our children are sitting right next to us as it is all unfolding. To help us navigate these hard conversations with our younger loved ones and perhaps even provide us with a little bit of clarity for our own feelings, we welcome Dr. Marni Axelrad, the clinic chief and pediatric psychologist at Texas Children's Hospital. Dr. Axelrad, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your joining us today because it's such an important thing to talk about at a moment like this. And if you'd like to join us, anyone out there listening to us, if you have any questions or comments or thoughts to add for us or for Dr. Axelrad, give us a call, 713-440-8870.
You know, Dr. Axelrad, I have to just right off the bat ask you, what should parents know about talking to their kids about these type of devastating events? And I know that's kind of a broad question, but let's just start there.
It is a broad question, and I appreciate it because there are devastating events that occur, and knowing the generalities of how to talk to kids is very important. I think first, what you said earlier is very important. Children are looking to their parents as models. about how to cope and what to do. So the first thing is making sure that parents are getting the help that they need, that isn't from their child. It's not their child's job to help them cope with this event, so they can model appropriate coping with their children.
Now, Dr. Axelrad, one of the areas that we keep looking at this when we're talking specifically about this natural disaster in Central Texas, one of the areas hardest hit was Camp Mystic, and it was little girls and that look a lot like our own kids. And my daughter is 9, and so should I be talking to her about it? Because I did, and I don't know if it's a mistake or not, but I did talk to her about it, and she's been tapping my shoulder every 5 minutes saying, Mommy, did they find, what's the latest? So what is the age-appropriate guidelines when you are talking to children? Because I know what will look like for my 9-year-old might look like different for my 4-year-old.
Exactly. For younger children, as much as we can shelter them, we should be sheltering them from the information. There's no reason for a 4-year-old to have this information if we can shelter them from the images, from people discussing this. If they do hear about it, then we're talking about the most basic information possible for young children with reassurance. I think that in this tragic event, there were several young girls similar to the age of your daughter, and so it becomes much more difficult to shield them from that information. And in some ways becomes much more difficult as parents to be able to put yourself in that situation and yet still model calm and appropriate coping with the tragedy. I think that less information is often more. So even at age 8, 9, children don't need to be exposed to all of the images and all of the information. But letting them know that this tragedy did occur, and yes, children lost their lives, and we're feeling really sad about it. And however you're feeling right now is the appropriate way to feel. And so validating children's emotions, some children like your daughter will ask every 5 minutes, and you don't necessarily want to repeat the same information every 5 minutes. And some kids will say, what are we having for lunch? And that's absolutely okay too.
So I'm wondering how exactly you might explain this to a child. I am not a father, so perhaps you can tell me, what would I say to my child if the child asked me a question about this?
I think that it partially depends on the question. If they're asking, what happened? I heard that something terrible happened and children died. I think being as honest as possible while still protecting them. So saying, yes, there was a tragic flooding event at camp in this area of Texas, and children and adults lost their lives, and it's very sad, and we're all feeling very upset about it. And then what do you do as a family generally in difficult situations? So some families will say, let's pray for those families. Some families will say, let's think about those families and send our best to them right now. And what can we do locally to help feel like we're making a difference?
And Dr. Axelrad, we often hear when it comes to grief or, tragedy, that children grieve differently than adults do. Can you elaborate on that?
I think that all people grieve in their own way. And I want to be really clear that in the first days, weeks following a tragedy, whether that's a personal tragedy or a national tragedy, people will be grieving differently. And however they grieve is the appropriate way to grieve. So perhaps children will ask a lot of questions that they wouldn't have asked otherwise. Or perhaps children will be a little bit more clingy, want to spend time with you, have trouble falling asleep, tell you that they keep thinking about these girls and how bad they feel. And all of that is appropriate. It's also appropriate to take a break from the images and take a break from the discussions and use some positive distraction as necessary. And so validating, I hear that you're feeling really sad. I'm feeling really sad too. how about we put a movie on for a little while? Or how about we cuddle on the couch together and talk about something else?
Dr. Axelrad, what resources does Texas Children's Hospital have available for parents if they would like to find out more information?
Absolutely. Starting this week, members of our traumatic stress and resilience team will have in-person and virtual appointments available for families directly impacted. We are reaching out to schools, so students who have been directly impacted can have a plan and a resource for the educators, administrators, and caregivers at those schools. We'll also be hosting a series of virtual education and support sessions open to the community, so not those necessarily directly impacted, but people who are really wanting to know more about how to talk with their kids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marni Axelrad, the Clinic Chief and Pediatric Psychologist at Texas Children's Hospital. We'll be back for the second hour. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Holocaust Museum Houston, featuring Unveiled from the Vault, showcasing never-before-seen artifacts from the museum's collection. Viewing begins with opening reception on July 24th. Details at hmh.org.
We have 89 degrees. Looks like we have a chance of showers and thunder showers this afternoon, a high near 88. Your NPR station, KUHF, Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The catastrophic flash floods across South Central Texas are blamed now for at least 85 deaths. Local authorities say the fatalities include those of 48 adults and 27 children, many of whom have not yet been identified. Teams are expected to fan across about 70 miles today looking for flood victims as the region braces for more excessive rainfall. Kerrville City Manager Dalton Rice says the search and rescue operations will continue from Hunt and North Kerr County all the way to Canyon Lake and Comal County.
They're running into a lot of technical challenges with terrain, with water, even potentially, with weather, in the rising fields. We've talked about this before. Volunteers stay out of the way because if we start getting weather reports and all the other complications that are out there, we then have to pull off of those search and rescue missions to be able to communicate to those volunteers to get off, to make sure that they don't become victims themselves.
NPR's Rebecca Hersher reports climate change is causing even more rain to fall during the most intense storms.
Up to 12 inches of rain fell in central Texas in the early hours of July 4th. It was too much water for the ground to soak up, and the excess water was funneled into low areas in the hilly region, causing catastrophic flash floods. Flash floods are relatively common in the area, but climate change is making such rain events even worse. That's because a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. The heaviest storms in Texas are dropping about 20% more rain today than they were in the late 1950s, when the Earth's climate was significantly cooler. That's according to the National Climate Assessment. And the risk is projected to grow as global temperatures continue to rise. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
Meanwhile, the events in Texas are amplifying calls for an investigation into whether DOGE-related staffing cuts at the National Weather Service hampered advance warning and response. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to visit the White House this evening, while President Trump works to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. More from NPR's Tamara Keith.
In a social media post, Trump said he is aiming for a 60-day Gaza ceasefire that would see the release of more Israeli hostages and could lead to an enduring end to a war that has raged since the Hamas attack on Israel October 7th, 2023. And then there's the matter of Iran and its nuclear program, which Trump says was knocked out by U.S. airstrikes last month. Trump previewed the Netanyahu visit during a flight on Air Force One.
Well, it's going to be a very quick celebration. We had a great hit. It was a obliteration. Okay, now it turns out it was an obliteration.
Trump says he is open to direct talks with Iran, something Israel has opposed in the past. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Officials confirmed 75 people dead in Kerr County, 48 adults and 27 children after the recent flash floods swept through the area, many calling it one of the worst disasters the county has seen. Local and state agencies are prioritizing search and rescue operations right now, using tools like boats, drones, helicopters, and more to find those who are missing. Meanwhile, residents in Kerr County are rallying together for the first steps of recovery. Martha Mariama's home on the Guadalupe River flooded on Friday.
It's a total loss, but we're blessed. We still have our home and we haven't lost any lives. So yesterday we had a lot of church families show up and help us get rid of all the furniture, empty it out, rip up the floor down to the base. And then this morning we're tackling our garage. I'm used to being the helper, not the receiver. So this has been a real blessing.
Disaster response will be part of lawmakers' agenda for the special session starting in 2 weeks. Governor Greg Abbott raised the issue at a press conference following this past weekend's deadly flash flood. Carrie Stevens, an expert on disaster communications at the University of Texas at Austin, says that in rural Texas, the emergency response teams often have to go door to door to warn of impending danger.
They know the major employers, the major groups that are housing kids, and they contact those people directly to say, hey, this is important. You've got to stay alert on this. But that's a super manual process. It's not necessarily something technology is going to solve all the problems.
During the regular session, lawmakers debated a bill to establish a grant program for counties to improve emergency communications infrastructure. That measure passed the House but died in the Senate. It's currently 89 degrees and partly cloudy at the UH campus. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, working to help protect small businesses and the owners that run them, offering customizable coverages to salons, accounting firms, tradespeople, and more. Learn more at progressivecommercial.com.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back to Hello Houston. I am sitting next to, apparently, per our earlier guest, a legend, Doug Miller.
That means I'm old.
Doug, this has been quite a Monday. We've come out of such a tragic weekend. And again, for some of our listeners and viewers that might not know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I spent more than 25 years, I can't even add it up, as a reporter for KHOU, served on the board of the Houston Chronicle, the editorial board. So I've got a resume that looks like a rap sheet.
But, we were talking about that earlier. You've covered a lot of these type of events. What feels different to you about this one?
Well, as we were discussing earlier, we saw the news coverage over the weekend said Central Texas, tragedy in Central Texas, so on Central Texas. Now, this was all over Texas. I mean, there are children from Houston, there are children from Dallas, from Austin, all over the state who were at those camps. There are people from all over the state who are vacationing there. I don't know about you, but I've got so many people on my social media feed who lost friends, posting pictures of their friends who were vacationing there. My accountant told me a harrowing story of a couple of his clients who woke up in a cabin, simply woke up in the middle of the night. There was water rising in their cabin, and the cabin was lifted off of its foundation. Went rushing down the river. They tried to stick together. She washed away, and died in the flood, and he survived, fortunately enough. But everyone knows somebody who knows somebody who was affected by this flood. It's a Texas tragedy.
It truly is. And it's one of those things where I feel like even if you don't know somebody, you can put yourself very easily in someone that was vacationing there. Either how of us this morning, I dropped my daughter and my son off at it's a day camp, but there's so many different connections and ways that you can put yourself in that situation.
Right. And so many of us have been to the Guadalupe. So many of us have gone tubing there.
Vacationing. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of Texas. I mean, I would say it's one of the most beautiful parts of our state.
Right. And just looking at the videos of how quickly that water rose, it was biblical.
In a matter of minutes.
Right.
But again, we want to thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston, whether that is through the radio on 88.7 or you're joining us via YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/Houston Public Media. And as well, you're always welcome to join the conversation at 713-440-8870, or you can email us, talk@hellohouston.org. But jumping right into the headlines today, among the hardest hit during the July 4th flooding was Camp Mystic, an all-girls beloved private camp. Several of the people that have been announced dead or are missing are from the Houston area, including many children who were at Camp Mystic. And some of those children were Greta Toranzo, a 10-year-old Houston ISD student who is, I believe, still missing. The HISD community members held a candlelight vigil for her on Saturday, and Humble ISD confirmed on X that a teacher, Jeff Wilson, was among the victims. The district said Saturday that his wife, Amber, and their son, Shiloh, remain missing.
This emphasizes to us, obviously, that this has affected so many people in the Houston area, all over the area. If you'd like to talk about any aspect of any of this, tell us what's on your mind. Our number is 713-440-8870.
And joining us now is Lauren Sweeney, a former camper and former camp counselor who holds Camp Mystic as one of her most favorite places. Lauren, thanks for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank y'all for having me.
So, Lauren, why don't we just begin with, Camp Mystic community, it's close, and it's close to your heart. Can you tell us about your time there and help people understand kind of why it's so beloved to so many women?
Sure. So it is, I've always said Camp Mystic is such a magical place, and really Hunt in general, which is where Camp Mystic is located, is magical. Right when you drive in, it just feels different. And I think a lot of what makes Camp Mystic so special, it's an all-girls Christian camp, is just the sisterhood that is developed while you're there. And Dick and Tweety have done a phenomenal job getting that established and just building this fantastic community.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about Dick and Tweety Eastland, who founded the camp and were the force behind it for generations.
Mm-hmm. And
absolutely, and still to this day, and they were very involved.
And I think there's been a lot of questions when there's been a lot of images of the map of, the campgrounds. And there are a lot of questions around Cabin Twin 1 and Cabin Twin 2 and Bubble Inn, the most affected cabins of the area. I don't think a lot of people understand why the youngest campers would have been closest to the Guadalupe River. Can you explain to us a little bit about the geography and landscape of that area? And maybe that can help people understand kind of why the youngest little ones were put there.
Of course. So one of the things that I think, Celeste, you and I were talking about that's so important to note is a lot of the visuals that you may be seeing on social media is there are two Camp Mystics now. The original camp and then Cypress, which is the other camp. This took place at the original camp. And the pictures don't really do justice when you are looking at it. Visually, it makes it look very flat, but the topography of Camp Mystic, when you are there, it's not flat. I mean, this river is incredibly far from Twins 1, Twins 2, and Bubble Inn. and all the cabins that were impacted. And not only far in distance, but when I talk about topography, far in height. You have to go up multiple flights of stairs to even be able, I think it's, just at least like 3 stories of stairs to be able to even get at the level where twins and 1 and 2 are. And even there, those cabins are significantly further back on the property.
And so, there's so many people remembering and honoring Dick Eastland. You mentioned Dick and Tweety. Did you know him? And can you tell us more about him and why he was such a beloved figure there at Camp Mystic and for many Texans?
Yeah, so Dick and Tweety are sort of like Texas royalty, in a sense. They were sort of the grandparents' parents when you were away from home. I have a distinct memory of when I was a camper there. Dick had come back from something. He was ill, and we all stood in a line from the very entrance of the camp all the way to Harrison Hall, which Harrison Hall is some of the which you see in a lot of the pictures that are out right now. And he walked through that line and held everyone. Dick was a phenomenal person. And after speaking with several people and, the Camp Mystic community, they all know that if there's no other way Dick would want to go, he would want to be with his girls.
It sounds to me as though Camp Mystic wasn't so much a camping site as almost a sorority. People are deeply loyal to it. I've read that Laura Bush was somehow involved with it. The daughters of Lyndon Johnson, the daughters of former Governor John Connally were in attendance. There are songs. There's a songbook. There's an album about it. It has quite a legacy, doesn't it?
It truly does, which just speaks volumes about the community that Dick and Tweety have built.
And a sense of community, too. Do you feel as though you have some connection to others who attended the camp before you did? Is there some kind of a bond between you?
It truly is a sisterhood. I've been in places in New York or even places across the world, and, if you're able to connect with another woman and, they're from Texas, a lot of people attend summer camps. And Mystic is a very beloved camp. It is like a sisterhood.
And,
so everyone is struggling.
And that's the thing. And this is making a lot of national news. And if you aren't a Texan, you might not necessarily understand kind of an all-girl, all-gender female camp. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? How I read somewhere where young girls could be laying down in their cabin and look up and maybe even see their grandmother's name inscribed on there. Talk to us a little bit more about that and what you want people to know about Camp Mystic on a national level that they might be misunderstanding.
Sure. It's a generational camp. My sweet little girls just came outside. It's a generational camp. And so little things like my name is up on Hangout, which was one of the top cabins, the very last cabin. And I've signed up my girls to go to Mystic. So it is a generational camp. Laura Bush went there. It's a special place. And I think what I want people to know is it's truly a magical place. And I think the community is truly going to know. You could have attended camp, or you could know one of the victims or be 3 people removed from it. Every single person is impacted. And just as parents in general, a mom and dad, everyone can relate and sympathize with it. I think everybody's heart is breaking together.
Right. Laura, I think we should explain something to people who are listening to the broadcast and not watching us on YouTube. We just saw I believe it was your daughter, came wandering into the image and mugged for us a little bit. I'm imagining you envisioned your daughter to attend Camp Mystic. That was your plan. Do you think she still might? Do you think the camp will survive?
That's such a good question, and I truly, in my heart, I hope that it does. And I know that every Camp Mystic, alum would say the same thing. We are praying and we truly hope that it will.
And from what I understand, you are close to some of the families who have lost their daughters. Can you give us an update on how they are doing?
You know, I went to camp with one since I was 9. Another one I went to college with. Another's I'm honored to call her a dear friend. It's impossible to put into words, right? I mean, the sadness and the heartbreak. I think it's silver lining is the wrong word, but because the community is so strong there and kind of what we're talking about, this sisterhood that is so unique, that it's really hard if you haven't been there to really understand the gravity of that sisterhood and the gravity of that small town community. Hunt is a very small town. So Hunt, Ingram, Kerrville, they're all, 10, 15 minutes distance from each other. I think the community of Mystic and the community of where it's located will help lift those parents up and making them feel really supported right now.
Lauren Sweeney is a former Camp Mystic counselor and a former camper. Thanks so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank y'all very much.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think, Doug, as we listen to these stories of parents and mothers and women who can relate to going to camp and having your friends, like you said, a sorority, there is nothing like rallying through grief and bonding and saying, this is a tragedy, but we're gonna support you and stand with you.
And again, it was the folks involved standing together. But I look at neighborhood next door pages from around Houston, see photographs of girls who have confirmed to be dead. Others are missing, young girls, and how it is noteworthy. I think certainly that it was on Saturday night that a large group of people gathered outside of Sinclair Elementary School over in Timber Grove Manor, a neighborhood that was struck so hard by the derecho last year. They gathered to offer their support for the parents of a young girl who's still missing.
That's right. Greta Toronzo, a 10-year-old Houston ISD student who, HISD community members held a candlelight vigil for her on Saturday and gathered.
Right. Well, many questions have been raised throughout this entire process about the weather forecasting. Should meteorologists have given a more emphatic warning? Could they have known that this was going to happen? Well, we've invited to join us Dave Gorham, a longtime meteorologist here in the Houston area. Dave now lives in Kerrville, and he was right in the middle of the heavy rainfall and the destruction overnight on Friday. Dave, I'm sure, followed all of the forecasts, watched the weather closely. Once a meteorologist, always a meteorologist. You may recall Dave's name. He was the staff meteorologist here, did forecasts on KUHF for several years, worked for private services like Impact Weather and Universal Weather. Dave, really appreciate you joining us today.
Hi, Doug. Good to be there. Hi, Celeste.
Hi, Dave.
So, Dave, tell us your overall impression. What did you see on Thursday? You were watching the forecast. What did you expect, and what went through your mind as the night progressed?
Well, it's interesting because the forecast, I went back with my DVR and I rewatched the Thursday night forecast from our local NBC affiliate. By the way, I'm retired now. I've been retired for 5 years. So I call myself kind of out of the business, but as you mentioned, Doug, once a meteorologist, always a meteorologist. And so I went back and I rewatched what was broadcast on the local NBC affiliate from San Antonio Thursday night. And it was actually pretty good. One of the things that meteorology struggles with, and by meteorology, I mean the science of meteorology, is the exact amount and the exact location of where rainfall will be. For those longtime Houstonians that remember Tropical Storm Allison back in, I think, 2001, right. This system was very similar in the sense that it had very little steering current. It didn't have a whole lot to direct where it was going to go. Meteorologists could figure that it was not going to go anywhere fast, and that it was not necessarily going to go in any particular direction, but kind of meander and linger. And it certainly did that the local meteorologist out of San Antonio said, I think a maximum of 5 inches.
Wow.
And people, I think, are going to say, well, that's not even half of what fell. And that's probably correct. There was significantly more rainfall than that. But I think the bigger question, as we begin to Monday morning quarterback this scenario, is the alerts.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the alerts? And I'll tell you that 5 inches of rainfall, the amount that was forecast, is enough to cause significant issues in this area. Watching all this news coverage, I learned just the other day that the Guadalupe River Valley is the most dangerous river valley in all of the United States.
Right.
And that's because of the flash flood potential here. Wow. You look out across the horizon, you don't see mountains, you don't see dramatic scenery, but it's all canyons. It's all going down low to the riverbeds, and the Guadalupe riverbed collects a lot of rain from a lot of areas. And even though the forecast, I think, was not inefficient, but less than perhaps it could have been, I don't think the meteorologists could have done much of a better job with the information that was available. And I think the warnings that they issued were good too. Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
No, pardon me for interrupting, because you mentioned the Guadalupe, basically a canyon there. I mean, if that water starts rushing down toward the river and it gets in, I've heard it compared to sticking your thumb on the end of a garden hose. The more pressure you put that much water in that much of an area, it becomes high pressure, and that's what you've got there. You've got rushing water, a giant wall of water, and that's what we saw.
Let's not forget that we're in a drought out here. Despite the recent heavy rain, we remain in a drought, and the hard, compacted ground cannot absorb all that rainfall. And so for the hundreds of square miles that lead away from the Guadalupe River, all that rainfall is, very little of it anyway, is being absorbed into the ground. Most of it is just rushing downhill into that river and then down into Hunt and Ingram and Kerrville, and then downriver. But as I mentioned, I looked at the forecast Thursday night, and the warnings seem to be good. What they issued at 1 o'clock in the morning should have been sufficient to cause local officials to act.
And that's a point that we've discussed earlier in the program. Apparently, from what we know so far, it sounds as though local law enforcement authorities didn't actually go knocking on doors or whatever. Something they did do, they at least did notify people in the 1987 Guadalupe. That's something that's going to have to be investigated to
well,
a
and compared
degree.
to 1987, the population out here, I don't know how much it has grown, but it has grown substantially. And you're talking about small roads. The main road, 39, that leads from Kerrville into Ingram and then Hunt and then up the river, that is a 1-lane, each direction, twisting, winding road that is difficult to make progress on with any type of speed. And to get into all those camps, I think I read there's 18 camps along the rivers. What's really necessary, I believe, and others believe too, is that the warning system that Kerrville and Kerr County passed on years ago is necessary. There needs to be a warning. The National Weather Service pushed out alerts to cell phones at 1 a.m. or shortly after 1 a.m. And how effective was that?
Dave,
apparently not enough.
You mentioned the National Weather Service, and there has been a lot of questioning around it, but it seems like for the most part, what we are hearing from people that have really been looking at the timelines of when alerts were being pushed, it seems like the National Weather Service did what they were supposed to do. Does that align with your perspective?
Yes, it does. And I'm distant, and I'm doing Monday morning quarterbacking, but from what I've looked at online, from the National Weather Service sequence or timing of events, what they issued beginning Thursday night and continuing into the midnight and early morning hours of Friday, July 4th, it seemed like what they did was right. And I'll add, too, that the National Weather Service out of San Antonio, I believe, is 22% understaffed. I don't know what their staffing was, but I think they brought in extra help. They staffed up for this event because it really was identified, I think, as early as Tuesday, and it continued on Wednesday. And for those of us that remember college meteorology or maybe high school meteorology, balloons are sent up across this country, around the world actually. Weather balloons are sent up twice a day. And it was that Thursday night balloon that went up that triggered meteorologists to say, oh my, that is a lot of precipitation potential. And they began formulating the warnings that went out later. Those balloons are critical to improving the accuracy and the timing of these forecasts.
And Dave, I think you get to an interesting point there. Yes, they did their best to predict what was happening, but no one anticipated this much rainfall. And I think people have the sense that a weather forecast is somehow a guarantee of what's going to happen 5 hours from now or whatever. You may not like this, but I always told people when I was in television news, they complain about, oh, the weatherman was wrong last night. I'd say, well, a weather forecast is quite literally an educated guess.
That's right.
It is a guess about what is going to happen. And sometimes that guess is going to be wrong. And
Doug, I got to say, it's a guess, but we also have so much technology. And I think that is the big thing that a lot of people are saying, is that we might have certain weather service, offices and areas that might be understaffed at 22%. Obviously, you said in the San Antonio area. I believe here, based on some of our reporting, that the Houston area, our National Weather Service office is about understaffed by 44%. How much of that can be brought in with technology, Dave?
Well, I think we're on the threshold of AI helping in that way tremendously. As I mentioned, I've been retired for 5 years, and so I can't really talk to staffing levels. Across the country, though, my statistics say 40 to 60% of National Weather Service offices are understaffed. So it's significant. The government's been making a lot of cuts recently, but the National Weather Service is a public safety office that probably shouldn't have those kind of cuts. We'll see how that all shakes out. But I think technology is really going to improve efficiencies. I'm glad I'm not a forecaster today, but I said the same thing 10 years ago, because more and more automation and more computing power are coming to the science, and they're eliminating jobs that once were thought uneliminatable. But it just seems that they were not able to be cut, and then technology advances, and suddenly we've got cut jobs in the weather field.
Yeah, it is so fascinating that now we can call up weather radar on our phones and say, I can take the dog for a walk now. I don't want to wait 40 minutes from now. It's remarkable, the progress that has been made.
Well, you mentioned a minute ago, Doug, about when people talk to you about the weather forecasts and how often they're wrong. When people find out that I am a weather forecaster, they ask, how come my phone app is terrible? My weather app on my phone is terrible.
Yeah, Dave, why is my phone app?
I kind of laugh it off, but I think people feel that that's the case. And I will say to that, you get what you pay for. There's a lot of free weather out there. And for a guy who started his weather career in the Air Force and then moved into private weather forecasting, commercial weather forecasting, we charged our clients a lot of money for the weather forecast and the weather support that they received. If somebody with a free weather app thinks that they're going to get that kind of accuracy and support, they're wrong. And there are very good reasons why those apps change, but with almost every app being different, it's tough for me to dive into each one and explain why they're different.
Now, Dave, you are in the Kerrville area. What was your experience during this flooding event?
Yeah, I am, for those of us with video, you can see the ridge behind me. This looks out onto the south and west side of Kerrville. I'm in one of the highest locations of Kerrville, and we saw a lot of rain, but even the kind of high water crossings that we have in our neighborhood did not cross the road. So our management here in the neighborhood was very good. But I can ride my bicycle, I can coast from the garage out my driveway, down my street, and right to the river's edge. It's that close. I'm probably less than a mile from the river. A couple of miles, maybe 3 or 4 miles, probably more than that actually, to Camp Mystic. But what I experienced was local officials telling local residents to stay home, stay off the roads. We lost water for a day yesterday. That was probably related to rainfall and not the river. But my experience here has been, here in the higher elevations of Kerrville, has been mild. And I will say, I mentioned riding bicycles. I ride a bicycle around here a lot. And I know that the off main roads that I ride my bicycles on have been devastated. It's going to be difficult to get around here for a long time.
Dave Gorham is a longtime meteorologist here in the Houston area. He now lives in Kerrville. Thanks for joining us today on Hello Houston,
You're
Dave.
welcome.
Enjoy that retirement.
Oh, I am. It's a Kerrville. It's a tourist area. You bet. I love it.
That's right. Dr. Kenneth Liao is the chief cardiologist transplant at Baylor University. Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center. He's going to be joining us later to talk about a revolutionary surgery. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Your right to know what's really going on in our world depends on more than just great journalism. It depends on your participation.
Houston Public Media is funded by Houstonians for Houstonians. 80% of our budget comes directly from you, our community.
That's how trusted information stays free and accessible. No ads, no shareholders, just clear and careful reporting.
Protect your right to stay informed by visiting houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com.
Support comes from the Eternal Gandhi Museum, celebrating International Day of Yoga with an open house, yoga for all skill levels, cultural performances, and more. Open to the public, June 21st. Registration at egmh.org.
Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate. Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, with the generous support from our founding sponsor, Kathy Sanders.
Support comes from Visit Galveston, an island-style retreat where visitors can experience historic architecture, museums, boutique shops, and more at this family seaside escape. More at visitgalveston.com.
Support comes from UT Health Houston, home to McGovern Medical School and Dr. Charles Cox, who is focused on reversing brain damage with his patients' own stem cells. More about the many faces of UT Health Houston at uth.edu/manyfaces.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celeste Diaz-Sherman and special guest host Doug Miller.
Today, we have news of a medical milestone from right here in the heart of Houston. For the first time on an adult patient, the nation's first fully robotic heart transplant here in the city that pioneered heart transplants in our country. The feat was performed at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, and leading the team that performed this surgery was Dr. Kenneth Liao, the chief of cardiothoracic transplantation, who guided this groundbreaking surgery. This procedure used tiny incisions, which meant that there was less trauma and a faster recovery for the 45-year-old patient suffering from advanced heart failure. Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Liao himself. Dr. Liao, congratulations. What a feat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to discuss this milestone achievement for us and for the patient too.
It is remarkable. It is truly remarkable. So let me tell you what I think a lot of people listening to this program right now have in mind. They're thinking of the Jetsons. They're thinking of Rosie the robot, or they're thinking of the robot from Lost in Space waving its arms around. That's not exactly what it was. Tell us how this procedure looked.
So this is the fourth generation robot. We use intuitive surgical robot, and there's a medical robot. It's composed of multiple arms, small arms, with a diameter about 8 millimeter, and the instrument tip is composed of 3 millimeter instrument like scissors, needles, holder, grasper. So that allow us to perform fine procedures inside patient's chest and without split open the entire breastbone. And with regard to the heart, the big, sick heart, how we get it out, we actually made an incision about above the umbilical button, about 5-inch incision underneath the breastbone, and behind the breastbone, once the old heart is cut out, we pull it out from that space. It's called pre-peritoneal space, and then insert the new heart into the pericardial sac through the same space, and then use the robotic instruments through sew it together, vessel by vessel.
So,
and it was amazing technology.
I was going to say, so Dr. Liao, besides the less trauma to the patient's body, what are some of the other clinical benefits of this type of robotic heart transplant surgery? Because you talked about you didn't have to necessarily split open that chest, and that's a lot of trauma. So you're omitting that, but what are the other benefits?
The other benefit is this robotic instruments allow us to make very fine movement, fine suturing in a very small space, and no more gentle. And then the robot can filter out the tremors and unwanted movement. So only that fine movement can happen. And also the image visualization is 10 times magnified field with 3D scope. Basically, we're looking at 3D picture 10 times bigger than native eyes. So every single small vessel, small bleeder, will see it very carefully. And the instrument placement is very accurate, probably more accurate than the naked eye and the conventional ways. That's why I think this is amazing. Like with regard to technology, it's a very fine move, in addition to all the benefits of preserving the patient's chest wall integrity.
So when you say fully robotic, we use the term fully robotic, did you have any contact at all with the robot, or did you just stand back and look and let the robot do its thing?
So actually, with fully robot means all the contact that the patient's heart is in, there's no moment with my hand, it's all through the robotic arms and then hands robotic. So I'm sitting about probably 5 feet away from the patient on the OR table in the same room. I'm operating this instrument through a computer console. Everything's done through a computer console, control the robotic arms at the patient's bedside. Yes, that's called fully robotic in a way, but not 100%. In the future, of course, with AI, with machine learning, with technology advancement, I can see one day we just program it, and then the robot will do the whole thing. So
Dr. Liao, I want you involved if my card that the robot's there.
You're hired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Liao, when you were in med school studying medicine, is this something you ever even fathomed could happen?
No. I was interested in the heart transplant, and then that was at the beginning, the 70s, 80s, that when the heart transplant is started. So everybody excited, it's a new technology, new treatment that treat end-stage heart disease. Now finally it is, in the 80s, there's some heart transplant can help. So, but never realized this like robot would come in and to help out. And of course, this is technology, is converging technology. We're doing a lot of robotic surgeries nowadays on heart. We can operate on the heart, mitral valve, aortic valve, all the valves, the bypass surgery. So we are doing this surgery daily and a very high frequency at the hospital, in the St. Luke's Hospital. So it's very natural to see this coming, and this technology and surgical expertise converge together to make it happen here.
Your patient, 45 years old. Was there any reluctance on the part of this patient when you said we're going to use a robot to perform a heart transplant?
No, actually, he is very into this because he's been stuck in the ICU bed for over 3 months. He had all these medical devices inserted through his neck, through his groin to support his heart. And his heart required multiple devices to keep it going. He's very weak. He had previously had a stroke. So he wanted something done to him that he can go quickly recover, get out of bed, stand up, start walking. So then we offer this robot technology without open chest. He's really right jump onto it. Of course, we told him if the robotic didn't pan out, we can still resort back to a conventional way. But he said he wants to go with robot with minimally invasive approach.
How's he doing?
Doing wonderful. He's already back to normal life. He stayed in the hospital for about 4 weeks, and then after that, he's gone, just totally free.
And how typical was his medical condition? I mean, is this something that can be done regularly, or does it have to be a very specific type of situation of heart disease?
So gradually, I think we'll do the more frequently now, since we know this can be done safely and efficiently in the patient like this. So of course, this patient didn't have previous open heart surgeries. The scar was not that intense inside the chest. And also he had a big failing heart, and the huge heart allows different heart size, different donor heart to fit in more easily. And then of course, the donor is from the local hospital. We have a good control about the timing. So all this has helped out, but long-term in the future, looking towards future, I think we can gradually do more and more this kind of surgery, and more people will benefit from this. So actually in our hospital, we're looking at future and then to set up a protocol to do more transplant like this. And hopefully in a year or two, we're making it a routine for majority of the patients.
Dr. Liao, this would not have been possible had it not been for a donor heart. Can you talk for a moment about the importance of that? How long did this man wait for a heart?
This man waited for heart for over 3 months in the ICU. So the blood type is one thing, and his condition and has to be in patient's donor. We have to find perfect donor, blood type, tissue typing, size, weight, and the distance, and a lot of factors put into this. So we have a great team, and day and night working on this, looking for the best candidate, best donors, and also probably the local Houston is fortunately an area that a lot of donations happen, and of course nowadays we have technologies using different type of donor. In the old days we use brain, that's heart, the donor for the heart transplantation. Now we have the donor from cardiovascular arrest, that heart arrested donor. It's called DCD donor. That actually increased our heart transplant volume by 30%. So technology and then the new concept of donation has helped increase the donor pool and benefit a lot of patients.
Well, this is an opportunity for us to put the word out over the airwaves. If you're not signed up to be an organ donor, maybe it's a good idea to look into that, because someone out there saved a man's life. And so did you, Dr. Liao. And so we appreciate your joining us today. Dr. Kenneth Liao, the Chief of Cardiothoracic Transplantation at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center. Dr. Liao, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay.
Coming up, we'll talk to leaders of the Periwinkle Foundation. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Elevate your impact with Houston Public Media. Today is New Member Monday. Now is the perfect moment to make a difference by becoming a new member. Your first donation supports trusted news, educational documentaries, and enriching arts on air. Join us in our mission to inform, educate, and inspire Houston. Visit houstonpublicmedia.org/donate and make your first contribution today. Together, let's shape a future filled with quality programming and community engagement. Thank you for being a vital part of Houston Public Media.
6 months after the Eaton fires, Altadena businesses are trying to make a comeback.
My worry is there's just so much building that has to take place that are there enough contractors, enough engineers, architects?
I'm Kristen Schwab, checking in on the effort to rebuild next time on Marketplace.
You can hear it tonight at 6:30.
I'm Josh Adams, the new general manager of Houston Public Media, and we are here for one reason, you. I'm thrilled to lead this remarkable team dedicated to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring everyone in the greater Houston area. And yes, these are challenging times, but together we'll meet them head on with bold ideas, honest reporting, and stories that matter. Houston Public Media is your public media. Together, let's make it incredible.
Houston Public Media presents The Moth Grand Slam, July 8th at Lambert Hall. Doors open at 7 p.m. The theme of the night is Dirt, stories about what lies beneath. Tickets at houstonpublicmedia.org/themoth. Support comes from Broadway at the Hobby Center, presenting the American musical Parade. In this real-life story, Leo Frank faces a test of faith, humanity, justice, and devotion. On stage July 15th through 20th. More at broadwayatthehobbycenter.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celestia Sherman and special guest host Doug Miller.
Thanks once again for joining us today on Hello Houston. We've been talking extensively about the events in Central Texas, the tragedy that has befallen the state of Texas. It has been a very difficult weekend for us here in the state of Texas. A couple of comments have come in on that on our YouTube channel. Alex Garza saying, it is amazing this event is being talked about all over this world. He said, this weekend I saw a beautiful post from, of all people, Volodymyr Zelensky talking about this. Another viewer, Gilbert Rendon, writing in saying, I'm showing gratitude to the volunteer firefighters and rescue specialists from the Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, who have joined the search and rescue efforts in Central Texas. We also had a comment about our last discussion about robotic heart transplants, of all things. Fritz Goldman writing in saying, wow, this is amazing technology. Can you believe it?
It was actually amazing. And, you know, there are some amazing things happening right here within our city. And one of those is happening at the Periwinkle Foundation. It's a Houston homegrown charity providing a community of healing to the children, young adults, and families managing through cancer and other life-threatening illnesses at Texas Children's Hospital. They realize this mission through a variety of programs, including camps, arts, and survivor programs, which accompany the child and their family through all stages of treatment, from diagnosis to remission. Joining us now to tell us more is Doug Suggitt, the Executive Director of the Periwinkle Foundation, and Justin Goodman, President of the Periwinkle Foundation Board of Directors. Doug and Justin, welcome to Hello Houston. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You know, something that immediately stuck out to me was, and I want you all to explain why self-expression through art is so important for healing in that process. And then I also want you to tell us about what you've seen when a patient is able to express themselves through art.
Yeah. You know, the doctors and nurses at Texas Children's Hospital, they consider the Periwinkle programs an integral part of their treatment process. Obviously, they do a tremendous job focusing on treating the disease, but you have to treat the whole child, and that's the social and emotional well-being of the child. So a lot of these kids aren't given the opportunity to do different things and make decisions and so forth while they're going through their treatment. So the arts and our programming give them a chance to showcase some of their feelings. And a lot of the doctors and nurses will look at the art that the kids have created while they're going through their treatment, and allows them to see insights to what they may be going through that they may not be expressing.
And Justin, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if you think about just how scary cancer would be for the four of us sitting in this room, right? Imagine being a child, you know, still learning the world, still growing and evolving, and not having the words or the experience to express yourself. This is a new medium, whether it's arts. They have different programs with Purple Songs Can Fly that can do music therapy. So it truly is a part of the healing process. And with Periwinkle, I mean, our mission is a community of healing and joy, which is all about the healing process.
I suspect you have seen some rather touching things from some of these children, the art they produce, the songs they produce. What sticks out of your mind? Justin, you are bobbing your head up and down.
So
Something's
it's
on your
funny,
mind.
if you look in a couple of our bedrooms, a couple of our rooms in our apartment downtown, we've got about 4 or 5 pieces of art from the kids, because it's truly beautiful and touching. And it's something you look at and like, I want that, because I see it every day and it reminds me of a child has overcome something I can't even imagine, but it's a source of strength for me when I see this beautiful art hanging in my home.
Tell us about one of those works of art.
So one, you ever see as a kid, you would do the little paper and you'd spin the paper and you'd drop ink on it and you'd kind of do almost like a tie-dye effect. Well, this is 2 layers of this tie-dye, and it's just this burst of color. You walk out of the shower, for me, I walk out of the shower, and it's the first thing I see as I'm getting ready for my day, and it just brings, like, look, I can do it. She did it, I can do it too.
You know, something that really stood out to me was also your survivorship, that portion of your program. Because so often we think about, you know, the diagnosis and what people go through, and then we think about, you know, oftentimes with cancer or other illnesses, you can see it looks very physical. So they look very sick. You can see that. But there's a component that often isn't talked about, and it is that survivorship. It is being on the other side of it. Talk to us about that program and how important it is to continue programs for survivors.
Yeah, the long-term survivor program is really an integral part of the programming that we do. Fortunately, a lot of cancer survivors go on with life. They may go on to college, trade schools. As a matter of fact, we have 2 doctors on our board of directors that were once campers that are giving back at the board level. A lot of our counselors come back as counselors, so they're really a tremendous inspiration to the campers and to the families that we serve. On the other side of the equation, sometimes the cancer and or the treatment, it was a little bit harder on the patient. And this group of survivors need a lot of social and emotional support. They need a lot of education and so forth. And so they became a really strong family. We do monthly socials. We'll bring in financial advisors. We'll bring in social workers to do different activities and things with these survivors, which are young adults in their 20s and 30s, to really help them navigate life and make connections to they want to have purpose as well, just like everyone else. And so the Survivor program is really instrumental in connecting them with the resources they need to give them purpose to have successful lives.
You talk about the resources they need to have successful lives afterward. It's something I suspect a lot of people don't think about. Psychological support, yes, but you mentioned financial. There's a financial impact from cancer. Talk about that for a moment.
Exactly. The cancer itself, it's outside of the physical, the financial, it's a tremendous burden on the family. And cancer does not discriminate, no matter how much money or how little money that you have. And so all of the Periwinkle programs are free of charge to the patients and families. A former board president coined it best that these kids have paid a pretty steep price for admissions, meaning their cancer diagnosis. So we fundraise throughout the year doing numerous events, from wine tastings to galas to golf tournaments, all to make sure these programs are free of charge. Periwinkle is a resource for these families. We connect them to other resources depending on what their needs are, but especially the survivors, because they do have needs that come up later in life, depending on what their treatment was, that we want to help be able to address or at least connect them in working through Texas Children's Cancer and Hematology Center to a resource that can.
And you're saying that all of these resources offered to these families are free of charge?
Yes, through the Periwinkle Foundation, every camp that we do, the arts and medicine programming that takes place 365 days a year at Texas Children's Hospital, as well as all the survivor socials and retreats, are free of charge to the patients and families.
And that's the thing, right? We were talking about childhood cancer, but it affects a parent because a child can't drive themselves to their, appointments and things. How does the Periwinkle Foundation community healing impact parents and families and caregivers?
Through a number of avenues, one being camp itself. As you can imagine, if you've got a child, sending them off to camp, it can be a daunting experience for the first time, especially if your child has cancer. One thing these parents get is we've got an amazing team of doctors, nurses, volunteers that have been coming for 30, 40 plus years that give up a week of their life to provide this really magical experience. So these kids are cared for in a very professional manner. They receive their treatment while they're going to camp. And what happens is you see a lot of kids, especially first-year cancers, there's a lot of nervous and anxiety in these patients. A little nervous, it's on the kids' part. At the end of the week, the kids they're not wanting to come home. And
Well,
kids are happy.
Doug Suggitt is the executive director of the Periwinkle Foundation. Justin Goodman is the president of the Periwinkle Foundation Board of Directors. Doug and Justin, thank you both for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you for having us.
And that brings us to the end of today's program. Doug, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure to be back with you. Good to see you again.
We want to thank you all for listening, engaging, commenting, and sharing with us today on Hello Houston. We will be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altai, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media.
Support comes from UT Health Houston, home to McGovern Medical School and Dr. Charles Cox, who is focused on reversing brain damage with his patients' own stem cells. More about the many faces of UT Health Houston